leaded kind of windows. Very, very cold and absolutely icy. And a sort of veining of the trees outside. None of that colour that you get with a stained glass window. There's no glow at all. There's no... The entire thing is a greyness, is an iciness, which seems to demand a kind of summoning up of the flame and the fire. There's no source of heat here at all.
Living can assist the imagination of the dead, said W.B. Yeats in A Vision. The old maps present a skyline dominated by church towers. Those horizons were differently punctured, so that the subservience of the grounded eye and the division of the city by parish was not disguised. Moving now on an eastern arc, the churches of Nicholas Hawksmoor soon invade the consciousness, the charting instinct. 8 churches give us the enclosure, the shape of the fear, built over early century optimism, erected over a fen of undisclosed horrors, white stones laid upon the mud and dust. In this air, certain hungers were activated that have yet to be pacified, no turning back. As Yeats claims, the stones, once set up, traffic with the enemy. The sun culture is a danger. It's too hot for random flirtations, to hold up that sign in a crow town, to affront the buried head of Bran. Hawksmoor, bird name, climbs above Wren's civilizing city patterns, fires his wing. Herodotus tells us that the obelisk is the symbol of the sun god at Heliopolis. Lautréamont warns that the weight of an obelisk stifles the spread of madness. Hawksmoor risks an obelisk over the grave of William Blake. He understood its meaning. What cosmic order does he affront, or do we affront, by raking over these old wound paths in this year of the tiger? Breaking the code of the churches gives us twin fears, fire and inundation. These holy places are ashlar-faced tombs of the sacred crocodile, or they demand sacrificial flame. They consume and they consummate. God's place, possession of the hollow body by demonic, multi-tongued fires. His guard is dropped, he's at ease with the rhythm of his days. Joe has his week's holiday. He drinks the calm restraint of Arthur's routine across the tired grass. The pollen dance is broken. We bend towards the equinox and we work the patch named Sir Philip Howard. The sky is sheeted, grey mauve. He feels the weakness enter the plates of his feet. The charge in his bone marrow sustains a field of deformed mushrooms. He can scarcely climb this humble Calvary and trim the toes of the wooden Christ. The day's alfresco lunch pushes his confidence to the point of risk, to rest with his back to the pyramid, St. Anne. The buried brain, the power socket, to swallow the can of mud water is difficult. The greasy fish twitches in his throat. Salmon Lane flickers into white fade as they return. By the end of the afternoon he's done. He can scarcely get the bike home. He feels, understands the true distance of this journey. The pain trail, the cutout mechanisms are inoperative. He sees every yard. So that the idea of viewing Murnau's sunrise is shelved, and the scheme already in motion of walking the flare path of Hawksmoor's churches by night in company with 2 others, taking drinks in the appropriate cellars and rat holes. Flash photographs to burn a dark halo around a necklace of shrines. The outing projected for the 9th day, the Sumerian time of sackcloth and ashes, and this was the overload. And what occurs is seen as sunstroke, a total collapse, water stomach, weak head, fever, 2 days sleepless, his body, his bed, vertebrae, a cage of burning wasps, and then the dry thunder, the club shaken. If he can climb out of the nest, it's the ultraviolet knife that forces him to confront the part of him that is Robert Louis Stevenson, thin-legged, thin-chested, light in ragged luck, consumptive skin flares, unnatural fires glowing beneath the cheek, the whole horror colour range, as with that night of chocolate cake cannabis, when cosmic ironies stretched into coffin draperies and his companion vomited, death ritual mask, the Jacobite, left-handed, Ahrimanic gruel water magics of Caithness are upon him, and he crawls out on the 3rd day, shaded in straw, a photograph of the last months of D.H. Lawrence. The whole fever condition is stained with the pus of the Stevenson figure. Stevenson is insomnia, the wall prints of an exhausted brain, hollow words echo, dream quotations that has to swallow the world.
Protection appears, and the gas blanket wears thin. When one lifts a flap of paper to discover both the human entrails and the starry heavens. What does he think is the governing process here? It is a total sun surgery. He is now post-operative, convalescent, with a taste of metal in his mouth, the iron of loss. He blinks from the days and illumination of shocktree. There are brilliant images on the borders of consciousness, but they cannot be replayed.
The spine shivers from the electric couch, sensitive to unspoken word, a confusion of tongues and radio voices from deep space-time. The dead speak too fast, a sense of genetic bombardment, as if the pattern of chromosomes had been remade, the DNA dial spun recklessly. This is a laser lobotomy, actual major character assassinations, worked by the sun knife, Jekyll dreams, Limehouse nightmares, germicidal push, all the bacteria of body light boiled in malarial blood heat, the Swedenborgian distinction between the spiritual sun, love, and the material sun, heat, Blake's sulfur sun. Surgery takes effect, and what remains? We stumble into the realization of a doppelganger principle, and the feeling was already present of a secondary personality developing, a car inhabiting the body shell. Not quite myself today. I'm host to motivations that cannot be understood. Stevenson again, and now suffering from what was loosely diagnosed as malaria, he convinced himself that it altogether changed into another character. As the ego breaks, I am host to another being who pushes through, and not with the pink tenderness of a new skin, but with old flesh as hard as wood. That earlier, I do not know who I am virus is confirmed, as a terminal caricature eases out of my face. Disease ratio is speedier. He's further down the slipway. He offers suicide cassettes, seductive quest routes, film clips of Orkney death rituals, and the whole horn pouch. The wind is aroused to push back the hairline, so there's a shock performance retake of seeing this thing in the bothy mirror as he washes the earth from his hands at the end of the day. He thinks of the churches as instruments of surgery, with himself as golem, invaded by the planetary beams focused by these pyramids. Invasion of the body snatchers. Disease is the means of intergalactic mutation. The germ is Martian. We're invaded by a virus bearing the message of the stars. Cancer is star memory, misunderstood or opposed. Involuntary sacrifices are the hardest to make. These white conversations rip open the sluggish condition. Talk is faster than light. And in the wake, the fouled wash, come the abortions, Scientology, Manson, Whole Visions, The Process, Roger Corman. It's too ripe, it's too ferocious and sudden. He wants to bury himself in a peat bog, to sink in limestone caves for 1,000 years, meditating on Conan the freebooter. Loss works his surgeries, the calculating intelligence, harnessing the dance of sunspots, till a form was completed, a human illusion, in darkness and deep clouds involved, that reason be cut into, bound, reforged, charged with wild light, ionized. Our mama's shadows recall this great archetypal pageant. It's all there in Blake's book of visions. Pale stood Albion at his eastern gate, leaning against the pillars, and his disease rose. Upon the precipice he stood, ready to fall into nonentity. Loss was all astonishment and terror. He trembled, sitting on the stone of London, but the interiors of Albion's fibres and nerves were hidden. The bodies are empty, cloud vapours of spin-off dialogues of thickened speech.
It's a oracular home. Sickness returns, citizens broken, sky is interrupted, renewed, resulting left to say becomes left to do, then all constellations begin fixed in their arrangements against the mad will retreat from the garden,
filled
the track
with depressants, antidepressants, vitamins,
courage and the great
denied vision,
as rubble blown over the railway roads, drink high must, weak skull or varicose vein of the male member,
prohibition, wretched as Caspar Hauser, that the mind can no longer torture the body, that the mind should be free. If you want to sample the worst London can offer, follow me down that slow incline by way of the Rotherhithe tunnel. The tunnel drips with warnings: do not stop, seal your window, hold your breath. This is not reassuring to the pedestrian who wobbles along a thin strip of paving, fearing to let go of the tiled wall, working the grime into his icy hand. Your heart fills your mouth like a shelled and pulsing crab. Why are there no other walkers? Traffic scrapes so narrowly past. The drivers are mean-faced and locked into sadistic fantasies. White abattoir walls solicit vivid splashes of blood. You feel the brainstem ineluctably dying, releasing at its margins dim and flaccid hallucinations. Half-naked labourers splashing through the darkness, struggling in the heightened air pressure that was necessary to keep back the waters, falling victim to caisson disease as they excavate inch by sullen inch the mile and a quarter of clay and gravel. Do not stop. Seal your windows. Read the scars and striations and wonder if some juggernaut will spread you into them. Keep moving, but not too fast. Don't breathe so deeply. We're still going down. It's the wrong tunnel. I must be halfway to France. Don't hyperventilate. Even if I do get out of here, it's too late. My brainstem will be pumice stone. Stop then. Rest, sit, and you're dead. The tunnel covertly opens a vein between two distinct systems, two descriptions of time. The outfall of the city is bled into drained marshlands. Electrical faults animate the rotting convict hulls, spin the wheels of coaches that clatter towards the Channel ports. Reports of foreign wars, remote revolutions run into the stacked trophy rooms of empire. A voice is forged, a bone whisper that belongs to neither bank. The tunnel is the ghost of something that never had a chance to die. Niches in the laboratory light of this shrine lack their votive skulls. Unfocused demands slide over the white tiles, searching for their oracle. The shaft should be a vertical stroke and not linked to profit, but always a boastful speculation, celebrated with bands and flags, stifling its birth and its true purpose. I decided that research could be pushed just so far. I had been under the river for, I don't know, perhaps half an hour, when I came across a ventilation shaft with a stairwell. Blades spun angrily in their cage, paying out with the worst of humours a sallow dole of air. A dark flourish of metal led upwards towards a light of hope. I must by now be back on familiar ground. I felt certain I had trudged at least to the outskirts of Cambridge. I vaulted a low barrier, ignored the prohibitions, and dragged myself, step by step, into the cool night. It was the unresolved hour, early evening. Dim buildings bent over me. I walked as fast as I could, but the townscape would not settle into any recognizable pattern. Disturbingly, everything was almost familiar, but from the wrong period. I was navigating with a map whose symbols had been perversely shifted to some arcane and impenetrable system. I stopped a man in a donkey jacket and asked him if he knew where the highway was. He stared at me blankly and then mumbled something that sounded as if it had been inefficiently dubbed. A chemist's shop was opened, but it was signed Apotheker. The realization came over me. I was dead. My hallucination in the Rotherhithe tunnel was to believe that I was still alive. I must have stumbled, fallen, crushed my head. I was now beached in the suburbs of Purgatory. I walked faster, clammy-handed, scrotum tightened with fear, trying to escape from my own shadow. I ran for the sanctuary of a squat and depressing building because the lettering above the entrance appeared to be in English, and I knew that the language of the dead would be a dreary, cuneiform Esperanto. The building was revealed as the Evangelical Church of the Deaf, a hellish vision. Bleak sermons of damnation thundered at a cowed congregation, their faces hidden in their gloves. I sprinted. Paradise Row led me through dark shells of decay to a Stygian river. I searched the far bank for the outline of the famous angel. I willed the skeleton of Tower Bridge to rise from the waters. Close passageways between tenements brought me to Hope Sufferance Wharf and the Church of St. Mary the Virgin. I passed through the gates into the churchyard, and there was a single distinguished tomb, railed off, and beyond it, across cobblestones, I could see the finely proportioned late 18th century house, with its oil lamps burning at an upstairs window. Standing proud from the building, floating, turned away from each other, were two children, stunted but not quite deformed, fingers clutching books. If the books slipped from their grasp, the children would fall to the ground. The trance-like spell of this levitation would be shattered. They were both dressed in woad-extracted blue. The boy wore a full-skirted coat with yellow hose, and the girl a long dress, clean pinafore and mob cap. Their lips were not altogether innocent of cosmetic enhancement. They stared expectantly towards the river. Their stillness was unsettling and otherworldly. They were not so much children as incomplete adults. But no force I could summon would turn them or bring them to speech. Their language would never be negotiable in this elided diocese. The breath goes out of me. I collapse onto the preserved tomb. All its neighbours have been reduced to an unreconstructed heap of slabs and broken angelic forms. I'm confronted with the legend of Prince Li Bu, and here he is, open-eyed, separated from me by a single sheet of stone, which becomes, as I lie facing him, a two-way mirror. I excavate his life from the letters on the grave. I'm forced to listen to the story from his own lips as they move in sync with the words that I read, and the words are subtitles cut in braille for the kingdom of the deaf. Li Bu is condemned endlessly to repeat the authorized version of what his short life has become, and we must make do with whatever audience he can secure. Until he is allowed to move, I cannot move, and that is the price the stone mirror requires. From that moment, Ten Brugge felt better. He tilted the burden of his head. There was so much sky. Passengers on the river, glancing back at him, thought he had made a discovery. He was excavating a shard of Roman pottery from the shallows with his teeth. When he looked over at the far bank, he forgot why he had come to this place. He had stopped trembling, and he felt light, and for the first time a little frivolous. A river plashed, a soup of mud, swooshing the immortal rubbish. backwards and forwards in a lullaby motion, and he heard the voices above him. Ten Brugge set himself to assess the riverscape on the far side of the choppy water, to fix the limits of his vision and to make them final. Rotherhithe was not a place to which he had previously given much consideration. It looked foreign. It looked somehow estranged from itself. The significance of this apparently random assembly of buildings awed him. He became aware of patterns, meanings, distributions of unexpended energy. His sense of colour was overwhelmingly personal. It hurt. It hurt his blood. The horrifying, soft green of the Norske Kirke flooded his throat with bile of exactly the same concentration. Cheeseway oozed from beneath his fingernails. The famous angel, the Tower of St. James's, Bermondsey, were ancient offences that only he could redeem. Pubs, churches, derelict wharfs, a solitary, odd, thin building, a slab of something left behind from a previous incarnation. Ten Brugge thought he remembered a woman at a drinks party telling him that Lord Snowdon had once lived there before he was inducted into the family. Bachelor days, clubs, paragraphs in William Hickey, demobbed photographers, models, gangsters, characters from the rag trade, all the big hooters and weak chins, horse mouths, taffeta, fag smoke, suicide. He heard the muffled and distorted voices of pleasure boats, identifying notable stones. They were talking under the water. They made no sense. Silver Marlin, Captain James Cook, fins of sour lace froth followed in their wake. They tore the fabric of the river, pushing a false tide towards Ten Brugge's inlet. The water was on him. Occasionally, a tourist waved to him from a boat and was disappointed to be ignored. But as the light started to go, Ten Brugge had a moment of curious intensity. He had what amounted to an involuntary close-up of that golden dragon, its claws hooked on a polished globe, and this was the weather vane of St. James's Church, more than a mile away. It was now so near him, he could see the paint flaking from the dragon's scales. He was drowning in physical detail. Breathless, aroused, they sang out, chips of blue-painted ceramic tile, sharp knuckles knocked from coffee mugs, wounded bricks, old clay pipes. He felt their history. He felt the warm hands of their owners. He felt the energy of their decay. It was all pouring into him. The light was unopposed. He was swept out of himself. He was strung on a chain of shimmering beads that absorbed each and every particle of his private anchorage. Gulliver agonistes. He could not turn Wapping to account. He could not number the crystals, unknot the threads that keep water from air. When the tide was at his throat, he almost changed his mind, came to consciousness of where he was, tore his flesh, putting weight and strength against the cuffs and the ring. And then he settled, softened. His back was against the wharf. A cloud of midges drifted from the slime-covered stone blocks of the old stairs. He could see straight through them. They had abandoned him, the familiar desires. There was no fret left in them. And he noticed now another set of steps leading upwards, leading nowhere, ending in a wooden fence. He opened his mouth and swallowed everything that was coming.
Hatred and the jealousy. Rain stripped us like a hail of blades. Our shirts were rags. Cathling's orange distress-bared jacket stuck to him like an acid-attacked skin. We were drowning where we stood, and I didn't want John Kay for company on this journey. I decided to go over the side. I pulled off my sodden corduroys and jumped. The water was halfway up my thighs. The sand was firm. Jobard, lurching like King Kong with a migraine, followed me. He'd lost his spectacles. He was blind to the horrors that surrounded us. He could have gone under and never noticed. He grabbed a boat hook and wrapped the tow rope round his shoulder and started marching off in the general direction of Norway. a deleted icon of Sir Christopher as a sumo wrestler. I shoved at the stern. The boat had taken plenty of water. Rain was falling into it like a molded bird bath. But it moved, it shifted. John Cage sat on the cabin roof, tailor fashion, watched it over the calm episode. Then was crossing the desert again, hand to water to sand, the rope stretched. Joblard vanished deep among canyons of rearing swell. Waves broke over his head. He roared, he shouted. We couldn't hear. For a moment we glimpsed him again, clinging crazily to his staff,
All these
blowing and swallowing his
big traffic slammed by. A work ethic buries ancient descriptions. And then, by way of locking up all into eternal silence, uniformly the throat was cut. There was no rationale for this second act. The precise observance favoured in Whitechapel. The windpipe severed, the throat cut with the same left-handed stroke. The butchery was formal, hieratic, imposing on. There was, of course, no logical reason for killing a creature who could make no coherent witness, but the murderer seems to have been pushed into a wheel of frenzy, forced towards pre-sculptural image-making. And then there are the clues in the word selection, the similes chosen to speed against the time, the random adjectives, most insinuating, snaky refinement, energy enough to jump up again like a pyramid of fire.
Not a selfish shrine, a cause, a cure, warm light that ice slits, blades the floor, the white enclosure.
Clouds are rolling seamlessly,
darkly from someone's driven path, fall to the ground, one unknown, yet well-known. I'm on my knees, penitent. I do not yet know what confession to make. You allow yourself to become saturated with this solution of the past.
It was closing in on Nicholas Lane's flat. It was all collapsing. Young Kernan and Quinn had been careless. He'd never been anything else. It hadn't mattered up to now. Nicholas Lane had been away so much, running about town with such friends and telephone, never stopping, freaked. Kernan went out and took himself off to the pub. He didn't drink, but he could get away with this massive sense of catastrophe, not knowing that he carried it with him, the shirt, its closing in, breathless, the dim way to the tower, folding in on him.
All kinds of weird stuff was going down, whispering in corners. Significant matches struck and blown out, the whores unoccupied with drinking heavily, the police occupied with drinking even more heavily. The grass in the corner wanted to drink most, but he lacked the poke. Can I take a look at that, son? Kernan ignored him. Scotchman, name unknown, motives questionable, a presence, clammy in undershirt and golfing jacket. I think I read that one, it's a good one. Kernan lifted the book and held it in front of his face. He hadn't turned a page since he'd sat down. The book wasn't his. He picked it up at random. It was a light one, an easy one to carry. He heard Nicholas Lane putting the Scotchman down, and he tried to run in books lifted from the Seaman's library. He'd been on the dry, and it was getting to be bad news all over.
Shaving a block and rolling it up with long, white, scrivener's fingers, the uninhibited exercise of skill, Nicholas Lane at home. The slats were down. Kernan, a hand out to grab the toes at the door. The world at his elbow, the heavy street door wide to the night, the chains dangling impotent. I would like to examine that Arthur Conan Doyle's study of the scars, if you have it, sir, if you can put your hand on it. Nicholas Lane is putting his hand on J.B. Priestley, his veterinarian's finger wriggling into his rectum. Sure, there's just one more scrape left.
Quinn hovered, twitched, a shadow, skin tight, eyes swollen, mind flickering, on, off. The blackout's better than the rest. Nothing, man, is grey, panes of light, hitching up his trousers, so much thinner. Are these his trousers? The phone drills in on them. Sorted out, it's Howard Omega, all the good books hidden in the bed. Family decamped, the Scotchman might have been casing the place. Nice mirror they got there, son, worth much? Get a few quid down the lane.
Nicholas Lane takes Mr. Clown to the back room. A trail beneath lethal towers of books and slippery canyons, lightless towards the bed, peels back the sheets. Clown does not blanch, sniffing his gold. Lane rummages, looking through the flimsy texts, the scattered three decades, the limited editions, the movables. The phone drills again as delivery. Can Lane hold? It's Omega. As Omega walks towards the street door, gets his foot on the step. The unmarked but highly visible squad car
bleached to glass. The words float in sheets of crystal air, released, forming and reforming. Deep in the enemy's country, nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was struck, shattered the bone. I should have fallen, worn with pain. Have you settled a price, sir, for this item that might be agreeable, sir, to all the parties concerned? 8,500. Lane quickly adds another 500, seeing Omer divide up the answers on the threadbare Turkey carpet. Would a cheque be satisfactory, sir, said Clam, patting his pockets, not quite sure if the sum mentioned might be lurking there from his last trip to the office.
The door to the room floated inward like a vertical raft. Something was wrong. It was like looking up at a raft from under the water. There was some kind of distortion. It returned to the horizontal plane, crushing Omega's uplifted arm. Quinn was swearing when an axe handle caught him in the mouth, taking out 3 of his upper teeth cleanly, painlessly, with some bits of a few more. There were 3 of them, black stocking masks, rhino-faced, 2 with axe handles, and the third had an axe handle with axe attached. And they kicked over the straw laundry basket, and they pulled off the heads of the children's toys, and they smashed up the glass-fronted cabinet, and they took all the packets and powders and resins and cash, and they destroyed sensationalist, surrealist, gothic, hermetic, lyric, domestic literature with a fine lack of distinction. And they gave Nicholas Lane a bit of a kicking, staving in a couple of ribs and detaching a kidney. He'd been too busy to vomit for the last week, and now there was plenty to untang, brown and sour and smelling of death. And they took the pamphlet out of Leopard Clam's hand, and they tore it to shreds. And if any other collector had been holding a copy, it would at that instant have doubled its value. Nobody else was, and that tunnel into time was sealed. Perversely, at that precise moment, it flashed into the narrator's mind that the name of the man who introduced Watson to Holmes was Stamford, which was so close to the name of the town where the book had been found. And the heavies settled themselves and took a blow with vodka in a bottle, and waiting for the yelp of a hungry phone, and they knew the whole operation. And Omega is made to answer every call, and every mark is told to come round and to bring the bread, and they arrive and get their heads banged and their pockets cut, skewered face down to the floorboards. And after a couple of hours the chaps are holding in excess of £4,000, and all that stuff, a human carpet of foul buckets. And the phone insists one last time. A hunter looking for anything by Frederick Brown, and the man with the axe took the instrument from the wall and he wrapped it around Omega's neck. I think it's for you, John, he said, was his parting quip, and they were gone. It could have been a log from the brewery, down on the hippie trash. It could have been a connection with the Scotchman, and it could have been a double cross, stumpings and dud stuff. It could have come in from the ether, constructed out of their own paranoia. And whoever it was, they wore well-worn, polished black shoes, with thick rubber soles, blue shirts, size 17 collars. When the worst has happened and all your fears have been confirmed, there's a momentary sense of great calm and well-being sometimes. The woman crawls over a field towards a plane tree where another woman and a man are sitting, disputing a bottle. Behind them is the ruin of a defiled sepulchre.
Noel drew from his pocket and reached deep down into it. A bag. Would you care for a grape? I am not sure that I shall be in a great hurry to come down. There is no reason to move from where I am now. Not even an eyelid or tongue over dried lips.
Clouds drift away to be speared on the towers of another Jerusalem. Hinton weeping claws at the topsoil. Matfelon, the church of Mary Matfelon, must be destroyed in fire.
A little girl of 10 came to me while I was sitting on the harbour wall and said, "Do tell me about the fluxions." I replied at once, "Multiply me 17 by 13, so you know 3 times 7 is 21, 1 and carry 2, 3 times 1 is 3, and 2 is 5 equals 51.
The following morning, the watch committee, the dignitaries and the welfare, the charitable fathers, walked over the ruin of Mary Matfelon. Lead was in shining pools on the grass, blood splinters from the windows, calcined stone, wood crumbling like skin to the touch.
They enter, separate, from 12 unmarked doors, hooded in white gulls of heresy, incongruous cowls over uniforms of anonymous power, graves, chalks, lime. The instruments are set upon the surface of the table.
And in the wreck of the church roof they discovered 12 sealed coffins that had been secretly lodged. The coffins were small, a few feet in length, and black from the fire, but undamaged. And they gave the order for the seals to be broken, and they found within the perfectly preserved bodies of 12 very young children, tightly wrapped, with their eyes now closed.
I'm happy and sorry, and just now I cannot see a bit whether that gladness is coming on earth. It is coming or it is not.
We went to the flat in Everingham Road and that's what happened. The murder took place there. It's like walking in a dark alley. You never know what's there. I mean, it's just chance. It was put in his own car. We tried to first of all to get in the boot, but obviously we couldn't get in the boot. The reps and lied about placed in the back of the car, his own car. It was two-tone, Mark II, Solex. I was followed by two others in another car. And I drove out of Everingham Road, down towards Motorway Mare Street. I come down Motorway, went down to Mare Street.
Hand and Hyle ascending, narrative track. Thus Albion sat, studious of others in his pale disease, brooding on evil. Hand and Hyle, shards of Suma washed ashore 178 Valence Road, beyond the brickfields to build a Crimson Lake dynasty of iron and blood knuckles, dividing the space of love with brazen compasses. Hand and Hyle their disguise, sons, dutiful and hating women, who could trap and bring forth children, their own assassins, preferring unnatural lust to normal practice. Hand and Hyle, damaged, Kundalinic, swallowing the serpent down to magmatic halls, coupling with beasts in fire orgies of mud and slaughter, at will contracting into worms or expanding into gods. Nerves aflood with molten metals, hog-faced, shaved, order the ghetto run on closed rails. Spieler opens its throat, voodoo chilly voices push them over, cooked that a zygotic drama, twin ribs break, uniform hereditary pattern. The way back is savage and quite outside the protection of any library, to recognize self under his cowl of flesh. Who is which is who. The structure of the head has become a helmet, redshift, as face drags against the enfolding lips. Forward, Last Supper at the Old Horns, Bethnal Green, beside the slatted barn, gear point in a net of corpuscular magnetism. Just beyond the geomantic limit of the projected, the floating Basilica. 6 a.m. arrest, cardiac, climb the hill. The bread knife goes in below the eye and opens the stomach, through the windpipe into the carpet, flesh disposal, ritual feasting. To justice before heaven, here upon London's stone. Arrested despair, pre-dawn thinning of blood in its chamber, sleep cycle slowing, scorpic clister, crabs on a seabed of shale and sponge rubber, foam on the tongue, heated, fast breathing, car tires, the long shadow of St. Luke's needle administers the Largactil, the Valium, Depsipol, Dissipal, Mogadon, Warfarin, the calming panic, locking ram by horns to cuckold, together on the couch of their father's loving, the disguised rovers hauling in asphalt, smoke wheel, the blue circle of seizure cancels breath, bands the neck, Bunhill Row flats they are taken, a splintering of early morning light, the scorpion scuttles back into grave march, the tattoo escapes from the ankle, white stain flinches from the leathered touch of crime squad's tentagal tooling, the width of relief, a new road opening, walks his territory, marking the boundary stones as dogs do, White Cross Place, Sun Street, Apple Street, Pindar Street, the old power connections, Wilson Street, late century messianic spasms, reels in the Blake scheme, the Ripper Museum, Bunhill Fields, Orseman Road, British Museum ethnography store of totem poles, juju, blood-sloped clay, Whitmore Road, Hoxton Street, the latter rain outpourings revival, the Green Man, birthplace, vegetable tunnel, and the magnetism jolting through the spinal knobs, a hair-burning shiver from the paving slabs into the feet, an ice warning, Hercules Road, Bayliss Road, the Cut, Borough, High Street, Newcomen, Snowsfield, Druid Street, Tower Bridge, the Minories, Mitre Square, Houndsditch, St Botolph, Gravel Lane, Wentworth Street, Old Montague, Durwood, Hanbury, Old Dorset, Spitalfields, Lamb, Quaker, Code, the Earl Grey, Green Gate, Bladeburn, Old Horns, of the Stars, ground by his heel, Billy Daniels, Sonny Liston, Lord Boothby, in sand at the ditch point where the current flows fastest, to consult the oracle of the streets. Black ooze of buildings floods his eye, shadow drafts over the city, hills disappear under stone derivations. The light, even now, burns through the skin holes, the egg of protection, penetrated by light tendrils of other exiles. The dead have settled into the walls, Nag's Head, empty chairs are occupied, a mouse gnaws the cigarette that nobody has abandoned, the grey ones hang in cellars, hover over underground dugouts, autograph the walls and sepulchres, chalk hopes for eternity, fog is pouring from his nose, hand is walking death. Hand and Hyle condense the little ones and erect them into a mighty temple even unto the stars, but they vegetate beneath loss's hammer that life may not be blotted out.
I was followed by two other men in another car, and I drove out of Every Road down towards Merroway Mare Street. I come down Merroway and went down into Mare Street itself, up to Cambridge Road, up towards across Commercial Road and into the Blackwood Tunnel. Within 4 or 5 yards of me down the tunnel, a police car came down again, which obviously I asked it, but I knew within time that it was a sort of
plunges through ancient systems. His Rolls-Royce Corniche cruises the eastern city, climbs the path of hedgerow cures with the window locked and the heater fanning his ankle hairs. Saffron Hill to Herbal Hill, spectre of Chatterton, the domes of the city humping, a spine running south from the Angel, Penton Moan, Merlin's Cave, Percival Street, St John Street, Old Bailey, the Temple, crusade routes and Masonic handshakes, the cross grip of bandage, fires of Smithfield, the mould in the ground, the trapdoor, the slow, retained drip of architect power, Mitre Court, Rotherhithe, St Bartholomew's Hospital. These enclosures relating back once more to St Cross and Winchester, mysteries that made my heart too small to hold its blood. Know that they did locate the Grail, which was here, and the stones are flushed with it. The septic water of Holywell cellars prepares the pilgrim before he moves out west to where the Grail came from and was again, lifting crown over Warminster, Bodmin, disguised as sighting and floating dull sky moisture, seen only when gone. But this is all too specific and too active for Cotton. He requires something that can be folded to fit the pocket without a bulge. The truth is kept for a few. Who speaks to the great public speaks to me. Kotoff's movements are erratic. Fear sets in east of the money line, say Southampton Row, Kingsway, even perhaps east of Charing Cross Road and Watkins Bookshop. Original memory plasm lurks in fur shadows, 80s pogroms, soft-core sentiment for childhood's ghetto, bountiful visits. curtail the past and spurn city food, no smoke, no dope, no booze, senses deranged by their own appointment. What about Gurdjieff, Steiner, Castaneda, Eliot, Jean-Michel, Borges, black holes, Gurdon? To speak is not to know, don't say it. Kotov stares at the lowlife, a jugular twitch, something dirty is under his nails. He arranges for a small assassination and stays home for a week and orders a pouch of Tibetan chants and a handset story by D.H. Lawrence. He rescues a necrophile novel and sells a corduroy jacket with matching boots. But under it, the obvious mantle of paranoid tremble and rush is some peculiar blade of accuracy, a self-proclaimed Zen master, dishing out sharp lessons, realigning the collapsed dunce hatters by secret pyramid mensuration, so that they flee into gardens and harsh sessions of ego murder, so that they turn face to the naked weather I am the Joker, and using is used, whose own ego must burn on. Invisible crabs bite at his spine, invaded, the game is bitter, Cotton cannot withdraw. Hand and Hyle are waiting, it is their city also. The good friends, the front St. Anne limeways, the meths men cluster round the car, the thieves, the rust of the mouth, the booktubers, the mothmen, they will not protect him, the beggars block his exit, they revenge themselves with unspeakable psychic headlocks, with changed shape in his lace, with rat and seagull. No street is safe as a subtle his wife's bed. That angry agent spin off the fun seekers issue, revenges himself, he will fun seekers, how to find Scarthingers and Dark City, the gates close in his face, bloodless, Newgate, Borders, Cripplegate, Bishop Cottoff himself, carnage, the meters facing the air, the grid deafened by traffic, stars that grass or vision, low life in all its manifold disguises. His assassin,